This is the Anything Show with John Francois.
My fiance is a huge fan of Scandal, so she was excited when I was going to talk to you guys. One and two. I know. I mean, that applies to any Shonda Rhimes show, really. And Guillermo, my fiance, is in love with your character Huck on Scandal. That's her favorite character. And let me open up this question to both of you. Speaking of which, like when you have fans of the show come up to you and say, "Oh my God, you're my favorite! Oh my God, you're my favorite!" Does it get into your head to a point where you feel this pressure to just be perfect, like every moment you're on the screen subsequently, or do you just kind of take it as a sweet compliment and move on?
I take it as a sweet compliment, and my experience with people coming up to me has always been so kind and positive and loving. But no, I try to not take that with me to the next role and put that pressure on myself at all. I'd go crazy if I did that. I can't do that. Right?
Yeah, same. And I also feel like so much of our characters, I mean, we build them, and then so much of them they're built by Shonda Rhimes, you know, especially on Scandal. And so it was really hilarious to watch how, you know, if your character, I mean, Huck never had this much, but if your character was with Olivia Pope, your fans loved you. And if next week your character was against Olivia Pope, your fans hated you. So it was like,
yes.
Yeah, let's talk.
Very fleeting.
And a lot of that had to do with Twitter. So let's talk about that, because what I loved from hearing from your podcast is you guys reminding like how Twitter played a big role in Scandal's success.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have this whole section of the Unpacking the Toolbox podcast where we read tweets at the time. And I just, you know, Twitter was such a huge part of our show, this appointment viewing and all the cast and getting on every Thursday and tweeting with our fans. And it's really been fun to go back. We read tweets that were going on at the time of that episode, and it's like looking into a time capsule.
Yeah.
But Guillermo really likes reading the ones that are mean. It's hilarious.
Yes. Yeah. We don't just read the positive, like fun, like nice stuff. We read like, you know, like negative stuff and mean stuff, which makes it even more fun. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Tell me a mean tweet that you both saw in relation to either your show or the show in general, or your character specifically.
Oh my God. Somebody tweeted at me while like season 3, maybe. And they said, you look like you're constantly constipated playing Huck.
I had an entire night that was just like, I mean, I had an entire night where our DP used a wide angle lens and followed my back end into this house, and my tush took up like the entire screen. And and the entire night I was tweeting with people about my bum, some people liking it, some people not, but it was really fun and I'll never forget it.
Wow. And it looks like you guys take that with good humor, because or at the time, did you take that very personally? Like, how did you take it at the time?
It was really like you had to learn sort of quick on your feet. I mean, of course, we're insecure actors. So like for every 100 amazing tweets that people just say you're lovely and so talented or attractive, you're like, yay. And then there's like one mean one, and that's the one you think about.
Of course.
But you know, like Guillermo said earlier, it's like you'll kind of drive yourself nuts. Like I really tried to just scroll past anything negative and not really engage with it at all, because it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
I bet. Now, having not really gotten into Scandal as much as my fiance did, I mean, I listened to the podcast for this conversation, and what I was thinking while I was listening to it was just like, man, like you two have such fun animated personalities, and I almost feel like I can keep up with what's going on in Scandal through listening to the podcast as you recap each episode. So and that brings about a question, because, you know, we talk about the phenomenon of rewatch podcasting, and traditionally it's assumed that the listener has already watched the show or is kind of watching along with you as you're doing the podcast. Is it possible for someone to dive into this Scandal rewatch podcast without ever having watched an episode and just follow along with Scandal just by the podcast episodes. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. You don't need to have watched the show or anything like that to enjoy the podcast. We sort of delve into all these behind the scenes stories and like gossip and all this crazy stuff that was happening, backstage. And yeah, people are going to enjoy this podcast whether they rewatch the show or not. But of course, we encourage them, if they want to rewatch it, to go on Hulu and rewatch the show, because the show really does stand up, and it's a really, really great show.
And we do spend a lot of time, like I would say of podcast episodes, like, we do go over the storyline so you could sort of keep up that way. But then again, a lot of the podcast is me and G hanging out and then getting to hang out with like Shonda Rhimes, Kerry Washington, Tony Goldwyn, all the people, and like catching up and, shooting the what, and just like really enjoying each other's company. So I feel like the podcast also completely does stand on its own. And it's like a really, really fun listen.
Now, another rewatch podcast I'm keeping up with, the one from the sitcom Boy Meets World, and
yes.
It's a great podcast. So, based on their conversation, I want to kind of relay this question to you. Are you guys bracing for uncomfortable moments the more you get into the rewatch? Like, can you think of any episodes of Scandal where you're going to watch it and just be like, oh God, I was having a bad hair day, or I just wasn't acting correctly? Like, are you bracing for those uncomfortable moments?
My God, we're already there.
Yeah.
Like, I've already seen so many episodes where I was like, wow, was I terrible in that moment? Or like, oy, that outfit is not flattering. But again, the best thing about it is that it was 10 years ago. So you're sort of like, who is that even? I don't even, you don't really remember it. And so I don't know, it sort of protects you a little bit. What do you think, G?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. But again, yeah, it's been so long that you're like, it feels like it's a different person. But on the podcast, we're completely honest about, those times that we were insecure or when we felt like we acted horribly. That's also what makes the podcast fun, because we don't sort of hold back on that stuff. We're 100% honest about, the stuff that was going on and how we were feeling and all of that. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, as you guys kind of mentioned, whether you're a huge fan of Scandal or haven't watched the show yet, it's a great podcast to unpack, so to speak, Unpacking the Toolbox, the Scandal Rewatch podcast with Katie Lowe's and Guillermo Diaz of Scandal. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you speaking with me.
Thanks, you, John. And tell your fiance thank you so much.
Yeah, tell her we say hello.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, she's going to be gushing at this.
The Anything Show with John Francois is on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. Join us on YouTube, Facebook.com/The Anything Show, and Instagram and TikTok @Anything Show Francois.